What's up, guys? Today we're going to be doing a mid-tier build. This is going to be semi-budget because we're using a couple used parts. Now the GPU is going to be used and so is the CPU. Everything else is going to be new. Now I'm going to go ahead and discuss how to put everything together, how to test bench it, and then we're going to put it in the case and go from there. Along the way, I'm going to teach you why we saved on some parts and kind of splurged on others. But overall, this is roughly about a $900 to $1,000 build depending on what you can get the parts for. So first and foremost, we definitely didn't go all out on the motherboard, and that was just a way we could save and get a little bit better of a CPU and GPU. Overall, if you have the extra money, I would say let's go ahead and put it into either the GPU or the motherboard. That way the motherboard can be used later on down the line. Now, with this motherboard, we are limited because it does not have USB-C on here. So if that's something you need, that's another thing you can upgrade with. A couple other things you want to look out for when doing a motherboard is, as you can see, we have RAM here, and we've got dual channel with 4 slots. Now, if you want expandability or quad channel, or if you want to really overclock the RAM, this board is not necessarily designed for hitting that on the RAM. With the 1700X that we have here, it's actually not going to be a huge difference in power delivery, so we can overclock this to 4 gigahertz with no issues at all. Another thing you want to look out for is some USB, just kind of headers. So if you want USB-C, we don't have that header over here. We've got USB 3.0, which is plenty for most people. Another thing you want to look out for would be fan headers. However many fans you want in there, you can definitely pull from one and then kind of split it out, but it's not going to be as efficient if you wanted to go ahead and split it up with different fan headers. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and start the process of putting this on the test bench, get everything set up, and then we can go ahead and put it in the case after we know everything is working. So first off, we can go ahead and install our CPU, and right here, let's see if I can get it. Make sure you don't drop it. This is our Ryzen 7 1700X that we have here. This is a part where we kind of saved. We knew this was a working CPU, but it is used, so that's one way that you can save. It's really easy to line up. It's really easy to do with these AM4 boards. So let's see if I can get this to focus. Right here you have a little golden triangle. It's going to match up to a triangle that's on the board. So let's go ahead and do that. And most are going to be right here for the triangle on most boards. And all you got to do is pull this little bar down and then pull up, and now we're ready to insert the CPU. Now when you're pushing the CPU in, you really don't have to use any force. You shouldn't have any problems. If you put it on and it's lined up and it's not going in, make sure you check the pins, make sure nothing's bent, because this does not take pressure to put it in, so that's a big thing. You don't want to ruin your CPU. So we're going to go ahead and place it right where the triangle is, and as you can see, it's already dropped down. We don't have to do any force. Like you can see, it pulls up and it pushes down. And we're going to make sure that everything's lined up here, everything is good. So what I do is lightly, and key thing is lightly, just make sure that we're flat, and we're going to pull this bar down, lock it in place, and we are now installed. It's pretty simple, nothing too crazy, and you can even do a light pull, make sure that we have that grip. Now we know that our CPU is installed, and we're not going to have any issues there. Next up, we're going to go ahead and take out our RAM, and you can obviously put the cooler on now and do thermal paste, but I like to have a little bit more room. That way we can go ahead and put on the RAM. So right here we're using T-Force Delta. This is their RGB RAM. I really do like this RAM because it's a little bit of cost-effective RGB RAM, and a lot of customers in general like RGB on their RAM. What I've noticed, if you're trying to get into PC building, a lot of people care more about aesthetics than some of those extras and paying on that. They would rather have more RGB fans, RGB, and all that kind of stuff. So something to take care of and look at. So when installing RAM, it's pretty simple. It's kind of hard to mess up. Right here we have this little missing tooth. It's about 60-40, so you can line that up with that little gap right here. I can show you right here. You just got to line it up. And with most boards, since this is dual channel, we want to utilize that and have that better and faster RAM. So what I usually do is just make sure all these are out. So now we can go ahead and put in a RAM. We're going to line up that tooth with this secondary right here. On most boards, you're going to want to go skip the first one and get into our second DIMM right here. And then we're going to skip one and go into the fourth. That way we're utilizing that dual channel. So we're going to go ahead and place this inside the little slot, line it up. And now that it's lined up, you're going to click it in. You're going to hear 2 clicks, one on each side. Here's one. And then here's the 2. Perfect. So we have both locked in. Sorry, the box is a little loud. And now we go to the 4th slot. Sorry, this is hard with the camera in my head. Now that we're lined up, we're going to go ahead and do the first one. Click and click. Now our RAM is installed, easy peasy. There's really a simple way to do it, and then I just kind of clip these guys back up just so we don't have anything in the way. And now that we have the RAM installed, we're going to go ahead and put on some thermal paste, get this CPU matched up with the cooler here. And for this test bench, I might actually just use this cooler, really easy. So the way AM4 boards, they if you're using any of these stock AMD coolers, such as the Wrath Prism, so these are little brackets that clip on, and you can see right here, it's really simple. They just clip on. We're going to line up our AMD logo. So we have that lined up, and it's going to be in your top left. So that's going to be lined up with the brackets right here. And we're going to put our thermal paste onto the CPU. So there's been a lot of controversy, and a lot of people say one way or another with thermal paste. Me personally, with all the videos that I've watched and seen, you're never going to overdo thermal paste unless you glob it on and it just seeps over onto the board. Generally, this is non-conductive thermal paste, so you're not going to have that many issues. But on removal and putting a new CPU, and that's where you're going to run into the troubles. So I'm going to show you the X pattern in which I used. And right here we're using the NTH11. This is by Noctua. I really do like the Noctua thermal paste, have no issues, and it works pretty well. So we're going to undo the cap right here. And what I like to do is, just like a surgeon, you're going to press this really easily. And we're going to wait until, oh, that was a little too much. As you can see, it came out way too quickly. We can fix that, no problem. But we're going to do an X pattern. So from one corner to one corner, one corner. And it's really simple. Let's see if I can fix this on camera so I can show you that it's not too hard to do. So we're already starting that X pattern over here. And let me see if I can zoom the camera in just a little bit to help out. So we're just going to go ahead and lightly go down the entire CPU. And you can stop a little early since you're going to have that pressure outside. This is pretty much an ugly X, but you get the idea. This is really hard with the camera in my face, so sorry guys, but X marks the spot. That is plenty. I really don't think anything else is going to be needed here, because what happens when it gets squished down is it pushes out on all four corners, and that'll be plenty. I could probably put just a little bit right here on the edge just to make sure that we don't have any issues. And then I pull this back. If you're going to reuse this, pull it back so you get all the thermal paste back in the tube, and then we put our cap back on. Really, really simple to do. Now, let's go ahead and push this back. We're going to go ahead and put on our cooler. It's really, really simple to do. You're just going to line up this bracket, clip it onto one side and then on the other, and then we're going to get this lever and lock it in. So let's go ahead and do that. What I usually like to do is get the bottom one on first and then push the top one on. So let's go ahead and get that going. So, got one. And then you can even just hold it in place lightly. Pull the other bracket down. Sorry if I'm in the way. Just trying to line this up for us. See if you can see that. We're just going to go ahead and clip that last bracket in. So now that we have it lined up, make sure we're level on all sides. This little bar is going to lock it in place, so you're going to pull it over to the left. And now that we have that, we are all locked in. Cooler is ready to go. Make sure we're level. The camera's not, but let me see if I can move that for us. So we're all locked in on here. We're going to get the fan and put it into the CPU fan header. And right here, see if I can get this zoomed in for you guys. You can see these little, see if I can get that on camera, there's these little bars right here, and it lines up with the clip. It's really, really simple. And then we're going to put that into the CPU header. And we can do cable management and tuck everything in once we get this tested and ready to go. Now that we have the CPU taken care of, we got the cooler on, we have the RGB RAM. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to install our EVGA GTX 1070. Now, whenever you're doing a test bench on a motherboard box, you're going to want to move this motherboard over to the left, and I can line it up. And the reason we're doing that and having it hang just mildly is because we have this little bar here, and that usually pushes into the case. Now, obviously we don't have a case right here, so we need to have a little overhang so this gets lined up, and make sure that we get this set up. So I'll even get a little bit more specific. We see this little tooth right here missing. Has the same thing. We're going to use the top PCIe slot. And then you're going to hear a little clip. There it is. And now we have that overhang, so we have the GPU sitting flush with everything. And then we're going to take out our basically 500 gig SSD. We're going to connect that. I've seen some issues when you don't connect an SSD, but sometimes you can get into the BIOS without it depending on the board. Let me just go ahead and get a SATA cable for us. So this is a SATA cable. This is going to go ahead and plug into the board and your SSD. So we're going to go ahead and plug it into the board. Actually, this one would probably be easier. And you can line up these however you want. So you're just going to go ahead and plug it in to your board. And then right here, you're going to plug it in to this side, and then the other side is going to be your power, and that's going to come from your power supply. So we have that set up. Now we're going to bring our cables over from our power supply. And it's pretty easy. You can't really mess this part up with the power supply. We're using a Corsair HX650, what I just usually have for testing. So we're going to need to power the board. This is going to be power for the CPU up here. And then we're going to need to put power to our GPU and obviously power our SSD. So first off, it's really simple. This big guy right here is going to go to that big guy. It's just like Legos, guys. It's really simple. And the way you know which side to go is there's this little bar here, and we have the clip that's right here. Line up the clip with the bar, and then we're going to go ahead and plug him in. I'm going to do this best I can with the camera in my way. Just hear a little clip. There we go. That is locked in. Now next up, you can see these are really easy, and they're labeled on most, as long as you don't cheap out too much. PCIe is going to your graphics card. So this one is just an 8-pin. So you're either going to have an 8-pin, you're going to have an 8+6, or you're going to have an 8+8. Generally, it's like a 2080 Ti for that. Same thing. We look for our clip right here. Look for that little ledge. And we're just going to go ahead and plug him in. Really, really simple. Now this guy has power coming from the PCIe slot, and we have extra power since these are bigger cards these days. Now, you can see this one's labeled CPU. It's really, really easy. Same thing up here. Get our bracket, line it up with the bar, and plug him right in. A lot easier when there's a camera not over your head, so I gotta lean over to the left. And these guys go in one way, so you really don't have to worry about going and putting them in the wrong order. Oh, apparently I can't see, because it actually goes the other way. Perfect. Now we have the CPU power in. These little flat guys, you're going to see them a lot with powering fans and different things on your board. This is for SATA power, and that's going to go to your SSD or your standard hard drive. Plug him in. And right now we actually, as long as everything's working properly, we have a working computer. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug this guy into our test monitor. We're going to boot up the computer, make sure all of our stuff is working. You should see the fan come on. You should see if you have RGB, you should see that going on. And obviously we should see power. And what we only want to worry about is making sure that none of these cables are touching anything in particular, nothing that's going to hold down a fan, and obviously the fan's on the GPU. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on our power. And since we do not have our case header, and what that means, we don't have a power button, right? We don't have anything. We already have power to the board because we just turned that on. RGB RAM is already going, which is awesome, so that's a good sign. What you're going to do is on the very bottom right on most boards, you're just going to look if you need to in your manual, and you're going to look for pins. You see these? Let's see if I can zoom in and make sure we get everything going on so we can show you guys. So right here is where our power or our case header is. And you can see that either in your manual or your board should be screen printed and show you. You're going to see things like the LED header, you're going to see your hard drive, you're going to power, you're going to see your reset button and power. And they should be screen printed on right next to over here so you have a good label for it. If you only have something that's about half this size, your third set from the left is going to be your power. So we're going to see on this board, sorry if I get in the way, which one is power. And right here it's got screen print, power LED, we got hard drive LED or HD, we have power and reset. So the power actually should be the third one. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your screwdriver, and don't worry, as long as you're touching these pins, you're not going to short anything out. Even if you ran across it, you're not going to have any issues. This is just low power, turning things on, reset switch, and so on. So we're going to touch. You see there's two bars, one on the bottom and one on top for each row. We're going to touch the bottom to the top, and let's see if the third one is actually the power on this board. So let's see. Third one is the power, as you can see, and I'll pull this guy down just a little bit so you guys can see. Right now we have everything going on. Okay, so we have RGB, we have our GPU, and what this actually looks like is we're having a BIOS issue, just from what I can tell, or it's actually just doing the secondary boot. We'll see if it stays on. Perfect, it's staying on. So if you ever see that where it turns on, turns off, and it continually does so, generally you're probably using a 3000 series CPU, so that's either like a 3600, 3700, or anything above that. And the reason being is because your board does not match with the BIOS. And I know that if you don't know what a BIOS is, I'm going to go ahead and explain that to you. So there's a little chip that helps your board communicate with the CPU. So what you should know is if you're using anything before 3000 series, you're going to need a certain type of board that has a certain BIOS in it. Now, if you're using a 3000 series with an older B450, it's actually going to need a BIOS update. I know this seems like a lot, and we can go ahead and get into that to a different video, but you're going to need to update with a USB drive. We're going to update the BIOS so that way your chipset can talk to your CPU. And that is one of the biggest issues, is a lot of people don't have another computer to download that onto a USB drive. So we'll get into that different video. Check my other videos if you have any questions with BIOS or if you had that on and off and it keeps doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this in off camera, make sure everything's working, we're booting up and we're getting into the next form. Now after that we're going to put it in the case.